Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling something pretty relevant. As you know, tomorrow, January 6th, 2025, Congress is going to be counting those electoral college votes and finalizing the 2024 election.
Yeah.
And, we thought we'd take a closer look at this process.
Yeah.
We have a great article from CBS News titled, Congress Counts Electoral Votes Tomorrow. What to know as lawmakers finalize the 2024 presidential election results. And I think it's super interesting because I think a lot of people kind of just take this process for granted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, we kind of assume that once the election happens, things just kind of automatically fall into place. But there's
Yeah.
a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah. Especially if you're somebody who, maybe just pays attention to politics every 4 years during the presidential election, you might be sitting there like, wait a minute, I thought the person with the most votes wins. Like,
Right.
what is this electoral college thing?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a common misconception. We've seen it pop up a lot over the years, and it's really understandable. You think, majority rules, whoever gets the most votes wins the election. But in the U.S., it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, so let's break it down for our listeners.
Yeah.
Because we do have people listening from all over the world, and they may not be familiar with this really unique American system, this electoral college thing. What is it?
Okay, so think of it this way. Each state gets a certain number of these things called electors, okay? And that number is based on the state's representation in Congress. So it's the number of senators they have, which is always 2,
Right.
plus the number of representatives, which varies depending on the state's population.
Okay, so bigger states, more people, more electors.
Exactly. So like a California or a Texas, those big states, they have way more electors than, say, a smaller state like Wyoming or Vermont.
Gotcha. Makes sense. But how did those electors actually get chosen? Like, what's the process there?
Right. So that part can get a little bit tricky because it actually varies from state to state. There's not like a one-size-fits-all answer. But the main thing to remember is this. In most states, whoever wins the popular vote in that state gets all of its electoral votes.
So it's like winner take all.
It's a winner-take-all system.
Yep.
And that can lead to some pretty interesting outcomes.
And this is the part that always blows my mind. Like, you can win the popular vote nationwide, like get more votes overall, but still lose the election if the other candidate manages to snag enough states to rack up more electoral votes. It's happened a few times in U.S. history, and it can definitely be a head-scratcher.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that makes the U.S. system stand out, and it's definitely sparked a lot of debate over the years. Some people argue that it's unfair that a candidate can win the presidency without winning the popular vote, and others argue that it protects the interests of smaller states and prevents a few large states from dominating the election.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that people have strong opinions about. And, you bring up a good point. It's like, we're not here to say which side is right or wrong.
Yeah.
But we are trying to shed light on how this system actually works, because I think sometimes it gets lost in the debate.
For sure. And that's especially important because tomorrow, all those electoral votes, they're going to land in the lap of Congress.
Right.
And this is where things can get interesting again.
Okay, so set the scene for us. It's tomorrow, January 6th. What's happening?
So picture this, a joint session of Congress, which means both the House of Representatives and the Senate all together in one room. They come together to officially count the electoral votes that each state has sent in, and they literally go through certificates from each state, announce the vote totals, and in most cases, that's pretty much it. Formality, the president-elect is officially declared the winner.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned earlier, sometimes there are surprises.
Yeah, we all remember what happened in 2021.
Right.
Everything seems to be going smoothly, and then bam, a challenge pops up. A member of Congress objects to a state's electoral votes, and suddenly things get a little tense, a little uncertain.
Exactly. And that peaceful transfer of power that we often take for granted, it suddenly feels a lot less certain. And so what happens next is really crucial.
Okay, so walk us through what happens when someone objects to those electoral votes.
All right, so here's how it goes. Both the House and the Senate, they have to separate, and they go into their own separate chambers to debate the objection, and they have up to 2 hours to talk it out, hash things out. And then after that, they each vote on whether to accept or reject the objection.
Okay, so it's not just like a one and done kind of thing. It's a whole process.
Exactly. It's a deliberate process. And here's the really important part to remember. For an objection to actually succeed, it needs a majority vote in both the House and the Senate. Yeah, both. So even if one chamber votes to uphold the state's original electoral votes, the objection fails. It's a pretty high bar to clear. And, historically, these objections have rarely been successful in actually changing the outcome of an election.
So it's like a safeguard in a way.
Yeah, you could see it that way. It makes sure that any challenges to the electoral votes are taken seriously, but it also prevents, frivolous objections from derailing the whole process.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So while our CBS article doesn't give us any hints about whether we should be expecting any fireworks tomorrow, any objections or anything like that,
Yeah.
I still think it's so valuable to understand how this process actually works. The potential for objections, the debates, the separate votes. It just gives you a much deeper appreciation for what's happening behind the scenes.
Absolutely. And, it also raises some really interesting questions about the future of this process. Like, could we see more challenges, more debates in the years to come? Could there be changes to the electoral college system itself? And if so, what would that mean for American democracy?
Yeah, it's like a lot of things in our political system. It's constantly evolving and changing, and, who knows what the future holds. But being informed and engaged is the best way to make sure that our democracy continues to function the way it should.
Well said.
All right, well, that's going to do it for our deep dive today, but we definitely encourage you to follow along tomorrow and watch how this whole Electoral College vote count unfolds. You'll be watching with a whole new level of understanding.
For sure.
And who knows, maybe it'll spark some interesting conversations of your own. But until next time, keep those brains curious. Thanks for listening.